Hello, BookTube. Today I'm going to be giving you my reading plan for October 2024, and my reading plans are somewhat varied. I've got two novels by self-published authors, a collection of short stories by a self-published author, and a collection of short stories by booktubers, as well as two Cold War thrillers, which I'm going to be reading as a part of a personal project this month, and then two novels which are part of a series by a local author, which I plan to begin reading this month and continue to read until I finish the series. So I'll start with the novels. The first is Sanity by Neo-Victorian, which is my pick for my indie author of the month, where starting in August I decided I was going to read a different indie author each month, and this is my pick for this month. It is from a interview that Neo-Victorian did on Richard Nichols' channel, The Red Pill Fiction Factory, a story about a young man who gets involved in the US intelligence community in the 1990s, and then you see his interaction with the sort of community in a non-linear manner. Non-linear storytelling manner, and also has the story has sort of connections with events that took place during the Cold War and apparently even further back to the Second World War, which should be interesting. I should say that this is the first book in a trilogy, and I will actually be reading the whole trilogy over the course of this ongoing picking an indie published book a month or self-published book a month. However, I'm going to read a different author in between. So the second part of the trilogy I will be reading in December, and then the third part of the trilogy I will be reading in February. The second self-published novel is The Fisherman's Return by T.J. Owens. It's a Cold War thriller set in Portugal in the aftermath of the Carnation Revolution. I'm a big fan of Cold War spy thrillers, so I'm going to look forward to reading this. But I'm particularly interested in the fact that it's set in Portugal, which was an unusual country in the Cold War. For much of the Cold War, because it was ruled by a dictator called Salazar, who ruled the country through his Estado Novo regime. And he took power in the 30s and ruled right up until he ruled until he had a stroke, I believe, in the 60s. But his regime continued on until 1975, when it was brought down by the Carnation Revolution. But unlike the Francisco Franco regime in Spain, Portugal was not a pariah state. Mainly because during the Second World War, Portugal was neutral but pro-Allied, mainly due to the fact that Portugal and the UK they've been long-time allies. I mean, Portugal first formed this alliance with the UK, or should I say with England, back in 1386, and it's one of the longest continuous alliances in the world. And so, because of their relationship with the UK and the Allies during the Second World War, they weren't regarded as pariahs, and this meant that, for example, they joined NATO early on, and so it's interesting to see a book set there in this regime, which was not like Franco's regime, treated as a pariah state by the West. Particularly because not many Cold War spy novels that I've read are actually set in Portugal. I've read a few that are set during the Second World War, obviously because Lisbon at the time was a very big area for spying, and it was obviously had, as I mentioned, its pro-Allied neutrality. But Cold War thrillers set there are few and far between. In fact, the only one I can remember reading set there is Horse and the Water by Len Deighton, and it'd be interesting to contrast this book, which was written, I think, let me just double check, I think it was written this year, possibly. Yes, it was published. Well, I should say it was published this year, with Dayton's book, which was published in the mid-60s when Salazar's regime was still very much in power. It'll be interesting to compare and contrast between the way that Portugal is portrayed in this book compared with that one. Now, the self-published collection of short stories is The Glass Weaver's Tale and Other Stories by Guy Riddyhoff. I've done a video on this already because Guy actually contacted me and asked me if I would review this, and obviously I was happy to, and he sent me for free this physical copy. And I go into a bit more detail in that video about Guy and his background, so if you're interested in that, before I start doing my review of this, I do recommend you watch that. I should say that being a collection of short stories, I will be doing reviews of the individual stories, and at the end of the final story I'll be giving a roundup of my view of the short story collection as a whole. You should have the first review of the first story in this collection on up tomorrow, I should think. I should say that these are science fiction short stories. Now, the Booktuber short story collection is one that no doubt you will have heard of, which is Garbology, the Garb-August anthology, which was the brainchild of Criminoli and was edited by, if you can see that there, Troy Tradeup. And so, as with Guy Riddyhoff's book, I'm going to be reading one story a day until I finish finish the collection, which should take me this having 34 stories into the beginning of November. And so you should have at least for the next week or so, at the very least, 2 videos out to me, and then at least one a day well into November. And I'm going to look forward to reading this because I really enjoy Garb-August, and some of the stories in here look really good, and quite a lot of them are written by booktubers. So it's going to be interesting to read it as a whole just to see what they do. Now, the next 2 are the Cold War thrillers that are a part of a small project that I'm planning to do. This project came about because Gavin at Genre Books did a review of this, which is When the Kissing Had to Stop by Constantine Fitzgibbon, and it's it was written in the 90s. I think it's written in 1960. Let me just take a look. Yep, it was written in 1960, and it's about a Soviet coup in Britain. And as Gavin was describing this in his review, it reminded me of the other book that I'm going to read as a part of this project, which is A Very British Coup by Chris Mullins. Now, quote Chris Mullin. Now, I should say I haven't read When the Kissing Had to Stop, but I have read A Very British Coup, and I really enjoyed it. And the reason I say it reminded When the Kissing Had to Stop reminded me of A Very British Coup, because this is also about a coup attempt in Britain, except When the Kissing Had to Stop is about a pro-Soviet coup by a left-wing government. This is about a sort of establishment coup against a left-wing Labour government, and I think it'd be interesting to read these two and compare and contrast, where you have, on the one hand, Constantine Fitzgibbon being a anti-communist, conservative, anti-authoritarian, compared to Chris Mullin, who was very much a Bennite, on the Bennite wing of the Labour Party, and was a Labour MP at the time. So it'd be interesting to compare their view of things. And of course the differences between a book written in 1960 at sort of the coldest depths of the Cold War, being published in 1960. It's written just before the Cuban Missile Crisis. It's written in the year that Gary Powers gets shot down in the U-2 spy plane of the Soviet Union. You have the Vietnam War hasn't truly started at that point, and you've got very much the dark depths of the Cold War. And of course, this is written in, I think it's 82. Let me just double check. Yeah, 82. So it's when the Cold War is in another one of its very much freezing cold periods of the Thatcher and Reagan governments going up against the Soviet Union. The Soviets are obviously in Afghanistan. You've got nuclear weapons being put in Europe. You've got the peace movement, which was at the time riddled with Soviet moles. And there's all sorts, and this is very much, having read it before, I know it's very much influenced by the alleged plots that were carried out, that were said to have been carried out by MI5 against Harold Wilson's governments in the 60s and 70s. Now, as a part of this project, I am this coming Saturday going to be doing a live stream with my friend Stephen Stoppard, where we're going to discuss sort of Britain in the Cold War, where we'll discuss things like the alleged plots against Harold Wilson, the Profumo affair, the Cambridge spies, the information research department of the Foreign Office, the Albanian subversion in the late 40s and early 50s, the British involvement, and particularly that of David Sterling, the founder of MI5, in the North Yemeni civil war. Also, the spy scandals around George Blake. The naval, the civil servant in the Admiralty, John. I forgot his name now. Anyway, a scandal. He was a Soviet. He was a gay civil servant who had been compromised in the British embassy in Moscow in the early 50s, and then he supplied the KGB with huge amounts of information. And also the Portland spy ring, and so all the stuff going on around that, and sort of Britain in the Cold War. And it's going to be a really interesting discussion because I'm fascinated by that, and as well as the death of Hugh Gaitskell, and one of my and a discussion of what is one of the few conspiracy theories I actually believe in concerning his death. And so I would recommend people, if you're interested in these two books and what I'm going to discuss about them, listen to that live stream, or to say, or watch it, because it'll give you a good sort of grounding in what I'm going to be discuss when I discuss the review, when I review both Very British Coup and When the Kissing Counter Stop, as well as a video I'm going to do after I've done those two reviews, sort of doing a proper compare and contrast of them, as well as sort of the time in which they were written in a lot more detail. I should say, when I do the reviews of those two, I will mention some of the background details, but I'll go into far more details with the compare and contrast video. And then finally, the book by the book series by a local author. I've got two books here. The author is Jeff Tristram, who's made his name as a artist and caricaturist since the 1970s. And I live in Kingsford. He lives down the road in Wollaston, which is a suburb of Stourbridge, which is in that direction. And the series, he's got a long-running series following a character called David Day, it's a sort of autobiographical series where David Day is clearly inspired by Jeff Tristram's life and the characters in his life. But it's a very comedic series, and the stories follow him from the age of 10 up until pretty much modern day, and so the series ages with the character. And so these first two books I'm going to read see David Day as 10-year-olds and 11-year-olds. So the first book in the series chronologically, though not in publication order, is Hunt for Grandad's Head, which I haven't read, but I'm looking forward to reading. And then the second book in the series, chronologically, though the first one in publication order, is A Nasty Bump on the Head, which I have read and I really enjoyed. And there, let me just turn around if you can see that. That there is our author, Jeff Tristram, who I saw in Wollaston post office, but I didn't get to speak to him because I didn't recognise him until he was leaving the post office, and I was in the post office queue, and so I couldn't get out. I was about to be served in the queue. And so that was my one brush with fame. But I'm going to look forward to reading those, and I have actually got the third book in the series over there somewhere. I'll have to find out later, which I'll be reading as well. But as I say, everything on that I've shown you today, I intend to read. There might be other things I will read in the month, but that will be if I've got the time and if the mood takes me. So with that, BookTube, I'll say goodbye, and I will see you very soon, as I've got a number of videos going up today. Bye, BookTube.